Hey everyone, and welcome to Harboring Chaos. So today I want to do a video that's going to be a little bit long because I want to cover three different things. I want to talk about student protests. I know it's been a few weeks now since the story of student protesting have been in the news, but I just didn't get a chance to make this video. So I want to talk about student protests in a little bit here. Another thing I want to do is just introduce to you all what Harboring Chaos is all about, right? And the third thing I want to do is talk about the core principles of Harboring Chaos. So that's the third thing. So let's go ahead and get started. Oh, by the way, when we talk about student protests, what we're going to do also is we're actually going to write, for today, we're going to write a poem, okay, about student protests as well, okay? So that's why I have like this document open, because in a little bit, we're going to actually write a poem together. Okay, so let's see, student protests. Wow, there's a lot to talk about, but I want to start by giving you guys some personal anecdotes. Yesterday, we actually went to our niece's high school graduation, and that high school graduation was beautiful. The whole ceremony was beautiful. All the speakers did a fantastic job. One of them is a state congressman, and he came up there and he had this beautiful speech. And I will talk more about his speech in a little bit, but basically it was very a lofty speech, reminding us that in the end, we're just kids, right? And as a society, we need to never forget our core values, as we grow older. But anyways, congratulations to our niece for graduating high school. Very excited to see what she continues to do. She's a beautiful person, great person. Another thing related to graduation is a few weeks ago, actually, a good friend of mine, his son graduated from college. So when he went to his son's college graduation, this was the College of Engineering graduation here in Austin. He described to me another beautiful ceremony. And what was really interesting about it was he saw that, a lot of students, when they came on stage, when their names were called, they actually showed a lot of support for Palestine, right? So students would walk on stage and maybe unbutton their gown to show a shirt or so to show their support for Palestine. And this good friend of mine described to me how the audience reacted. He was telling me that everyone was like, applauding, and it got the crowd, it got a very positive reaction from people in the audience. He also told me that graduation ceremony, his son's graduation ceremony, the whole time there was actually a plane in the air or circling the skies the whole time. One plane that had a banner, or like a huge banner attached to it while the plane was circling the skies. That banner had like a support Israel message on it or something like that, right? So he and I talked about how interesting that juxtaposition is, right? It's like students underneath here showing their support for Palestine, but obviously some very wealthy, big money backed, support of Israel was flying in the air, showing an opposite message, right? Well, I bring that up because students and their protesting, right, and on these college campuses, I do want to just kind of high level and in general just talk about why student protests are super important, and what we can take away from student protests as a society and as an individual as well. One other thing before I forget, a few days ago, maybe about a week and a half ago, I was hanging out with my dad. He was driving and I was actually in the car with him, and I was in the passenger seat, and we were just talking about life and different things, but he brought up the student protests. And my dad, I love him. He's a great dad, amazing man. He is actually very progressive. If you don't know my dad, obviously you don't know my dad, but my dad is quite progressive, considering like his age and and compared to all his peers and even our family members, he's quite progressive, and quite liberal, right? But when we were talking, he brought up the student protest, and interestingly enough, at that time, he was expressing quite a bit of annoyance and even frustration with the students, protesting. And I was quite taken aback because I didn't expect this coming from my dad. But at that time, I just stopped for a second, and I think he said something along the lines of, yeah, what do you think about these student protests? Like these students protesting and stuff. And by the way, just to give you guys some context, like, he was not in a good mood. We were not in a good mood. We were heading somewhere to get something to fix our house that had some storm damage, and we were hot and sweaty, and we were not in the best of moods. And so I think this contributed to his frustration, and he just kind of started ranting about the students protesting. And again, I was surprised knowing my dad, and at that time I just thought for a second. I was like, but Dad, what do you think about the Vietnam War and all the student protests that happened during the Vietnam War, right? And I reminded him just for a brief moment that, hey, those students actually were our voice of reason, and they contributed a lot to us ending the Vietnam War and maybe at least stopping the draft or so. But when I mentioned the Vietnam War and student protests and the role that the student protests played, it definitely a light came on with my dad, and he was like, all right, I think he realized that he was in the wrong place at that moment to criticize students, and so he backed off, and we immediately talked about something else after that. But I bring up that story with my dad because it's so important that we stay vigilant, and we stay on top of even ourselves, and know that at any moment our conservative, I guess, tendencies could creep up, right, and can strike. So it's like we, as we grow older, and by the minute, by the second, by the day, it's like we can easily see things differently, all of a sudden, and we can see things through a very conservative lens or whatever, right? And which not necessarily is bad or wrong, right? But if anything, it's an interesting thing to just monitor, right? So with student protests, how do I feel about it, right? Like, actually, before I even go on a little rant and tell you how I feel about student protests, like I do want to ask you guys, right? Because that's the thing that I want to, I guess, focus on today. One of the three things, right, is like, what can we take away from the student protests at all these universities as a society and as individuals? Maybe as individuals, I find it even more interesting and more important. Maybe. So, right. So a few questions I have for you, right? Like, how do you feel about college students protesting, what's happening in Gaza, right? How do you personally feel about it? Are you for it? Are you against it? And before I go on, I hope that to everyone, we can all agree that what's going on over there, it's sad, right? It's tragic. It's a humanitarian crisis, and it just goes to show how I guess how horrible humans can be to one another, right? But hopefully we can all agree to that, and maybe from there we can find some common ground, right? But again, how do you feel about the college student protests? And I'm curious, like, what's your demographic? Like, are you older or are you younger? Are you a college student yourself? And here's another question I have. I'm just looking at my notes here. In general, right? Like, do you yourself tend to root for the underdogs or the favorites? Right? Like when you're watching a sports event or a sporting game or something, right? Like, do you root for underdogs or do you automatically root for the heavy favorites, for example? Related to that, I guess, is like, do you tend to root for the poor or the rich in general? Like, if you just, I don't know, we're watching a movie and there's a poor guy fighting a rich guy? Are you going to be like, you know what, I'm going for the rich guy? Or are you going to say like, I'm curious to see how this poor guy might come out of this, right? And pull through, for that matter. What about the weak versus the strong? How do you personally feel about like when you see the weak fighting the strong? Like, do you tend to support one over the other, or is it too general of a question, or does it depend, right? I think of Immanuel Kant, right? Or Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, in his categorical imperative, right? I don't know if you know what that is, but it's been a long time since I actually even thought about the categorical imperative. But basically, a question for you all is this: what if everyone were like you and rooted for and supported what you support, right? So if you're someone who supports, like the poor over the strong, or the rich, if you supported the poor over the rich, or if you supported the weak over the strong, and let's just say everyone were like that too, how would society be, right? Of course, not everyone thinks alike, right? So, it's a hypothetical, right? I think we need it's like the yin and the yang, right? I don't think there's one right answer. Not everyone should support the same thing, right? Right. So again, going back to my friend's son's graduation, and by the way, congratulations to my friend's son. I've known him since he was a little kid, and I'm very happy to see him graduate college. And again, excited to see what he does with his very bright future. Congratulations to his family. Very happy and proud moment for him and his family. But during that graduation, remember the scene is, you have students protesting while they're, receiving, or while they're going on stage and getting their names called out and during their graduation, right? And at the same time, you had like someone also kind of like, funding a plane flying overhead, showing their support for Israel, right? That juxtaposition, right? Students and maybe, I don't know, big money or something like that, right? But going back to Gaza, I mean, there's definitely, Palestinians or people who are a minority, right? Much poorer, being, adversely affected by this war, right? In a very tragic kind of way. But shockingly, some people, a lot of people actually, don't react too negatively to what's going on over there. But okay, so my rant when it comes to college protests is simply this. There are a lot of haters, a lot of people who are against it or whatever. I happen to love seeing these college kids go out there and protest and be, politically active, right? And even care about what's going on in the world, right? I love seeing that. I think it's refreshing. I think it's obviously from a societal role, as a society, we need them to kind of like keep us in check, keep us in line, right? This is the students, right? These are the students. I think obviously these are the future leaders of our society, right? And just like, Vietnam War, civil rights movements, even globally, like student protests all around the world have played a big role, in terms of maybe steering society in the right direction or guiding us, right? Even though they're students, right? They're younger and all that. So, shout out to students, keep it up, right? Like if you are out there protesting and you see what's going on, again, very refreshing, because if anything, it tells me that you still have a heart and you care. So I'll talk more about that right now, right? Because I feel like being a student, like we as a society, are kind of like individual people for that matter. We grow older, we grow more callous, maybe more cynical, right? More fear driven. And so we need this kind of youthful guidance, right? It's like, and now I'm reminded of the speech that I heard yesterday from, at my niece's graduation, right? High school graduation. That state, legislator came up there and he said, he had a beautiful speech, but he was just like telling us, I remember, I'm going to paraphrase here, but he said something along the lines of, we are all just, like all of us, everyone out there in the audience are just, kindergartners. no matter how old we grow, we're just really kindergartners. However, we kind of, as we grow older, we kind of forget our core values and what we were taught as grade schoolers, right? To be kind, to be compassionate, that kind of stuff, right? And he mentioned something like, and all we do is as we get older, it's just like me, me, me. How do I get mine? How do I become successful? Whatever, right? But we forget the most important principles, right? Which are the principles that we teach grade schoolers, right? And as a student, as a college student, hopefully you never forget those core values and those core principles, and you stay young at heart and you remember this and you listen to your heart, right? But as we grow older, I feel like we have to be, again, vigilant, because easily we can turn on the students. We can be like, what are they doing? You know what I mean? Like, anyways, so I do find that interesting. That's the key message today. Is I'm curious as to how you guys feel about college student protests, especially in regards to like the whole Gaza situation. But I want to remind you all, because I feel strongly that we should stay young at heart. We should listen to our hearts, and the student protest is actually a good thing. And I actually love seeing what they're doing, right? But I want to encourage you all and remind you all, please, like, you try to stay young at heart too, and listen to these student protests, right? Even if you kind of disagree with them, just see that there's value to what they're doing, right? And where they're coming from. Now, let's see here. Ironically, where they're coming from and where they are going to, because I think they have such a bright future ahead of them, right? So let's see here. Before I go on, there's actually a quote that I want to talk about today that I'm reminded of when I think of I guess student protesters and this youthful exuberance and this youthful movement, right? Being politically engaged and politically active. So this quote, it's a famous quote. Let me go ahead and just share my screen or share this quote with you guys. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it because it's a very frustrating and famous quote. Let's see here. Let me just read it out to you guys. I'm highlighting it. Okay. If you are not a liberal when you are young, you have no heart. And if you are not a conservative when old, you have no brain. Again, if you are not a liberal when you are young, you have no heart. And if you are not a conservative when old, you have no brain. So this is a very frustrating quote for me because I've heard it in the past, and every now and then I might hear it again, but I'm very afraid that people take this quote and misuse it, right? Because it's a very misleading quote. It's a witty one, but this is what my theory is. If you are a conservative out there, or if you're an older person and you are a conservative, I'm afraid you'll use this quote and be like, see, I'm conservative because I have a brain. And I think that's the intended purpose of this quote, right? The intent of this quote is to let people think, or kind of just to justify being older and being conservative by implying that you have a brain, and that's why you're getting, or you are conservative, or you're becoming more conservative, right? And therefore you can stay conservative because you're getting older and you have a brain. So anyways, I think this is very misleading because, first and foremost, young people have very bright minds, okay? I'm gonna do this anyways, but I don't even need to remind you. Here's just a quick Google search. What age do we stop learning? In most adults, learning and thinking plateau and then begin to decline after age 30 or 40, okay? People start to perform worse in tests of cognitive abilities, right? Et cetera, when they get older. So there's no question that older people do not have better or bigger brains than young people, okay? That's just absurd, okay? So if you're an older person and you're conservative, please don't think that it's because you have a brain, okay? If anything, maybe it's because you are losing your heart, or you are losing the ability to listen to your heart, right? And that's always a sad thing, okay? I don't care how big your brain is, you should always have a heart, okay? Not much to ask. So don't rationalize, don't justify being heartless, ever. if anything, try to stay young and have a heart. Exercise your brain, exercise, your whole physical body, and eat healthy and train your brain, train your mind, stay sharp, right? But always have a heart, okay? So this is a really misleading and silly quote. So if you ever hear this quote or if someone brings it up, just tell them it's a stupid quote. I'm going to stay young. I'm going to have a heart, and hopefully my brain stays sharp. Just like, as sharp as all those college students' brains are, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so, again, but it's an interesting quote, right? Because people misuse it, or they misinterpret it, or they don't think through this. They don't parse it out the way we just did, okay? So, can we all agree this is a dumb quote, okay? And can we all agree that's not how you justify growing older and being more conservative, okay? And I understand why older people tend to be more conservative. It's probably built in our evolution. It makes total sense, right? And having more experience, and that's another thing. Let's talk about that. Let's not, I guess, mix the two. Having more experience is not the same thing as having a brain, right? Or having a better, smarter brain. And if there's anything for students to take out of this, I would say, you know what? When you talk to older people and they understand where they're coming from, they might be a lot more conservative because they've been burned before, or many times, right? Because of their experience, they might now be a little bit more jaded or more cautious, even paranoid for that matter, right? So understand where they're coming from, take from them their experience, but continue to think scientifically and think logically, right? Think in a way that's fact-based and fact-driven, right? So, which I do see this in older people. They tend to kind of lose that ability, right? At one point when they become a little bit delusional and even paranoid. And I'm going to get a lot of flack from this, but I love older people, so I'm not trying to offend any older people out there. In fact, I say this because I love you all. If you're older, just be careful of this too, right? You don't want to just grow old and conservative because of, needless fears and paranoia and fear of, not being relevant anymore, and fear of like your faculties and your abilities. That's why I do think we need safety nets as a society, right? To take care of people as they grow older and all that. Anyways, let's move on from this, okay? So let's see here. In a little bit, I'm going to talk about the core principles of Harboring Chaos of this channel, because I realize it's so important. I don't intend to offend anyone, right? Hopefully this channel is all about love and trying to make everyone, including myself, better people, okay? So just keep that in mind. In a little bit I'll talk about the core principles. Right now I'm going to shift gears just for a little bit, okay? Let's move away from let's move on from talking about college student protests. Actually, you know what? I forgot. I want to actually write a short poem. I figured what we're going to do with this channel is we're going to try to create beautiful things. I am not a poet. I don't, but I want to write a poem because I feel like in this case, there are some words that I want to write that I want to try to make kind of beautiful based on these ideas, okay? But I want us to do it together, okay? I feel like the idea of, writing, it's not necessarily what you write or what you end up writing. It's like the process of collecting these ideas and navigating through things and these ideas together is perhaps more important. So that's why I want to do this, right? And we might even edit this poem later on. But because I'm actually not feeling very creative right now. So this poem might suck, but I love some of the ideas that we've talked about today, okay? So let's try to write this poem together. Cool. So obviously I want the poem to come from the heart and not be dictated by a desire to be pretentious and to be beautiful where we don't even need to be beautiful, okay? So I'm going to try to keep the message short and sweet, okay? I'm going to try. Gotta strike that fine balance, right? Because I think aesthetics is so many philosophical things that I've touched on today. Hopefully when I rewatch this video, I'll bookmark certain things that we can revisit later on in subsequent videos, okay? Like aesthetics and that kind of stuff, right? Okay, so let's go on. So First line of this poem is simply going to be thank you, students, for protesting. Thank you, students, for caring and taking the effort to be a voice for us. I say for being a voice for us because obviously the students don't represent all of our voices, right? But they are a voice for some of us, at least as a society, right? Okay, another idea I want to communicate is just this idea that they're gonna, students and just young people in general, right, will face a lot of backlash and feel a lot of negativity, right? And I don't want them to be discouraged by that. So here it is. I'm not gonna use the word. Let's see. Should I use the word fight? Yeah, I do like that word. Okay. One day, I'm gonna put the word actually in it. One day you may actually be against. What are we hoping for? Yeah. There you go. Let me try this. Thank you, students, for protesting. Thank you, students, for caring and taking the effort to be a voice for us. And being a voice. For caring and being a voice for us. Please don't listen to the negativity. Please continue to fight for what you believe in. One day you may actually be against what you stand for. But hopefully the next generation of students will be there for you. What do you think, you guys? I like it. Okay, so thank you, students, for protesting. Thank you, students, for caring and being a voice for us. Please don't listen to the negativity. Please continue to fight for what you believe in. One day you may actually be against what you stand for. Hopefully, the next generation of students will be there for you. Okay, I love it. All right, let's move on. So there's our poem. So this is gonna be saved. Every now and then, I think we'll have some kind of writing, right, to summarize our thoughts, right? Let's see here. Okay, so let's see. As I said earlier, what I want to do is just spend a few minutes talking about what Harboring Chaos is. I want to introduce this channel to you all. So Harboring Chaos. What the heck is Harboring Chaos? Okay. What is this channel about? Pretty much, I want to say that it's going to be a channel where we talk about a lot of interesting things. That's the key. They are things that I find super interesting, and I hope you all find them interesting as well. Okay. I don't want to use the word philosophy because I kind of don't like that word for so many reasons, but namely because I feel like just the etymology behind that word, right? Like philosophy, lover of wisdom, or love of wisdom, or lover of knowledge, or love of knowledge, right? I think it can be a little pretentious and highbrow. I happen to just love life and love people and love things. And so it's not the love of wisdom or love for wisdom. It's just lover of things, I guess, and that's what leads to me observing and asking these questions, right? So that's really what this channel is all about. We're going to ask a lot of questions. We're going to talk about a lot of things, and it's all coming from, very subjectively from my perspective, right? And so that's where I will probably ask you guys how you guys feel, etc. But we're going to cover a lot of interesting things that I find interesting from. We're going to talk a lot about God. We're going to talk a lot about people, obviously. We're going to talk about the notion of good and evil, what it means to me. Yeah, again, I'll bookmark that. We're going to talk a lot about all these stuff. And trust me, I hope that my definitions of these things are thoughtful. They're not shallow. Certainly, hopefully, you guys feel they're not arrogant either. Okay, that's another thing about this channel. I don't claim to be an expert on anything. Definitely not an expert, a subject matter expert on most of the things I talk about. But who cares? We're gonna navigate through our ideas, and we're gonna try to become expert. At least we're gonna understand how we got to where we got to. Okay, we're gonna at least be very familiar with the path we take. Okay, so that's what this channel is gonna be all about. We're gonna talk about so many interesting things, right? But we're also gonna try to truly make an impact, a positive impact. Okay, let's go ahead, and so that's the introduction. That hopefully gives you an idea, a vague idea of what Harboring Chaos is all about. Now I just want to spend like 2 minutes talking about the core principles of Harboring Chaos, okay? Please, let's keep this in mind, and I will try to remind us of these core principles too, okay? So the core principles might change in the near future, but for now, this is what I have. There are just five core principles, okay? Core principle 1. Try to not be mean and try to not hurt, okay? Try to not be mean and try to not hurt. Pretty straightforward. Core principle 2. Try to make a positive impact. Fight the good fight. Again, try to make a positive impact. Fight the good fight. Core principle 3. Try to have fun doing what we do, right? So again, core principle number 3 is we're going to try to have fun on this channel, right? This is very important because it can be very depressing talking about and thinking about the things that we're going to talk about and think about, okay? Just to give you a little heads up, right? We need to keep it fun because you're going to notice a lot of my beliefs, I guess, stem from the fact that I view humans as just animals, okay? We are just animals, right? And, we are unfortunately a little bit more intelligent, or a lot more intelligent than other animals. And it's because of that we do a really good job at I guess, covering up and rationalizing, our bad behavior, okay? Again, at the core of a lot of my beliefs, they're rooted in this idea that, humans are just animals. We are just savages, right? We have a lot of ego and pride and greed, and, we can be very moody and temperamental and very cunning, right? But knowing that, we're going to try to have fun observing humans, even forgiving humans for being human, right? And it can be really depressing because sometimes humans really could care less about what we say or do, right? So for every one person that we make an impact on, there are probably hundreds of people who are either indifferent or straight up against, our views and, our vision for what the world needs to be, right? So we're going to keep that in mind. And by keeping that in mind, hopefully it helps us keep things fun, okay? So haters abound. Like, that's something that I wrote just now. Like, haters abound. Haters are everywhere, right? So we're going to just keep that in mind and try to keep things fun. Now, before I go on to core principle number 4, which, by the way, is don't be a hater, I just want to share to you a quote that I wrote yesterday when I was thinking about making this video. That quote, let me see. That quote is actually related to an idea that I'm going to bookmark as well. I'm going to just, because I want to talk about it in the future. What I call the real original sin of humans, right? Real original sin. So I'm going to talk about our real original sin later on. in a future video, but the quote that I wrote yesterday is related to that, but here it is. So it's actually kind of related to core principle number 1, core principles number 1, 2, and 3, okay? Here's a quote. Perhaps the greatest moral dilemma is knowing what humans are and yet still wanting to exist as a human. Again, I'll read out this quote. Perhaps the greatest moral dilemma is knowing what humans are and yet still wanting to exist as a human. I'll do more than just read it. I'm going to actually paste it right in here, okay? That's what I wrote yesterday. You might think it's crazy. It is a little crazy, and trust me, I am not suicidal at all. I'm just pointing out the fact that this is a moral dilemma that we really should have. That we really have, I should say. Another moral dilemma is like existing and not wanting to fight the good fight, too, right? Like, what do? You either kill yourself or you might as well just try to fight the good fight, right? So again, that's core principle number 2, right, you guys? It's try to make a positive impact and fight the good fight. Okay, core principle number 4. Like I said just now, it's don't be a hater and keep this channel positive, okay? So core principle number 3 is we're gonna have fun, but sometimes, things can get negative very fast. And I just want people to remember, no one here should be a hater and no one here should try to be just negative, okay? I say this, or this core principle number 4 is very important because I'm going to talk a lot about very controversial and nuanced things, okay? And nuanced things are just like not for everyone. Like a lot of people just don't have the patience for it. And if you don't have patience for this kind of nuance and controversial stuff that I talk about, please, I want to remind you, let's don't be a hater and please move on. This channel is not for everyone, okay? For example, I could say the sky is blue, for example, and I'm sure some very highbrow know-it-all is going to be like, they're going to be upset and they're going to tell me I'm wrong, whatever. And that's okay in the sense that we disagree with each other, right? But let's keep things positive, obviously. Keep things fun, like I said, but also let's not be haters of each other's ideas and opinions, okay? Now, this segues to the 5th and final core principle. The 5th and final core principle is we need to think critically and think empathetically because everything is arbitrary. Everything is arbitrary, okay? Indeed, this is actually like the most core and most important philosophical belief that I have is that everything is arbitrary. It's honestly a very complex idea with many ramifications. We're not going to go into detail now. I'm going to talk about it a lot. But the big takeaway here is because everything is arbitrary, we are all very different. We're even different from ourselves like tomorrow or whatever, right? So things always change, but things don't always line up. I think of like the planets and the stars, right? Things may line up one day and then tomorrow they're no longer aligned, right? So because of this, we have to always think critically and empathetically, understanding that all people are different. If anything, try to understand where we come from. Try to understand how we come to where we are right now, how we've gotten to where we are, and how we formed the belief systems and the beliefs that how we come to our current beliefs, right? It's super important that we think like this so that we can empathize with one another. We don't just attack, right? We have a critical and empathetic lens, that we use to examine things, okay? So please keep that in mind. Core principle number 5. Think critically and think empathetically because everything is arbitrary, okay? So just a recap, and then we're going to close out this video. Number 1, core principle number 1, try to not be mean and try to not hurt. Core principle number 2, try to make a positive impact. Fight the good fight. Core principle number 3, try to have fun, okay? Core principle, I was going to say, enjoy the ride, or be here along for the ride. Enjoy the journey, right? Don't expect too much out of it though, okay? Humans are just gonna be humans, okay? Core principle number 4, don't be a hater and let's try to keep this channel positive. You may disagree with a lot of what I say, or you might not even like what I say. that's fine. Please, you can move on or whatever, right? Okay. Core principle number, just know it's coming from a good place. We're not here, like I said, to be mean to anyone. Core principle number 5, think critically and think empathetically, because everything is arbitrary. Okay. Guys, this is probably like a 40-minute video or so. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Everyone, thank you for your time. Be safe out there. Please like, subscribe, keep things positive. Share this with anyone that you think this appeals to. Okay. Namely open-minded people, right? And think of the whole topic today, student protests. How do you feel about student protests? What does it mean to you, right? I don't know. Hopefully I will see you guys soon. Thank you so much. Talk to y'all later. Peace.